In continuing the theme of the Abrahamization of Hinduism in the Western world, I wanted to talk about food habits, specifically the not eating of beef of the Hindus, and how what I have seen from a lot of American Hindus is they will compare this practice to Muslims not eating pork or Jews not eating pork, shellfish, and other kinds of things. Basically, to say that, well, these religions that are, of course, Abrahamic have certain taboos on certain meats, and Hinduism's taboo on eating beef is similar to that because there are religions that ban you from eating certain meats. That's what this is as well. And I think this is going to be what I'm about to say is going to be very obvious to any Hindu that's from India. But again, American Hindus don't really understand this, which is that this practice of not eating beef grows out of this kind of cultural context where many people in rural society own at least one cow, and the rest of the people that don't own cows get their milk from people who do, again, in a rural setting. And so people tend to look at cows as something that they interact with on a very regular basis. And the place of these cows, because of the fact that milk and dairy products are so important in the Indian diet, they're seen as kind of much more than just another farm animal that people will exploit for their own reasons, like, say, a goat or a chicken, which, of course, are animals that non vegetarian Hindus do eat the meat of. This is seen as almost more like a family member that people will really passionately take care of and, do go puja at, different points. And I've even seen like videos of people taking the blessings of a cow by kind of walking underneath its udders and things of this nature. That this religious practice, this tenet, grows out of a certain cultural context, which makes sense to anyone that is in India. And obviously, people who visit India know about how there are cows in the street wandering around. But people aren't really able to make these connections in their head here in the Western world because, again, like my whole theme in this whole series, they look at religion through the lens of Christianity because the West is a Christian society. Christianity itself doesn't have any food taboos because those things were done away with at the time of the Apostle Paul. But what they do have is a familiarity with Islam and Judaism, also Abrahamic religions, and they think, well, those people believe that God told them not to eat these certain meats, therefore they don't. We have a similar practice around beef, therefore we don't do this, where we don't have this idea of some God communicating with some person to write down laws on some tablets that then have to be followed, like the Abrahamists do with their Abrahamic God communicating with Moses. And instead, it's much more of a kind of folk religion type of practice. Now, what's also interesting is whenever the beef taboo and the cow slaughter taboo comes into politics with the variety of different cattle slaughter bans that exist in different states in India throughout most of the country, but that we see Gorakshaks, of course, protecting cows, and then the English language liberal media and minorities will say, oh, they're oppressing people and they're vigilantes and this and that, right? And what I think people don't really understand outside of India is that this is not really about just eating a particular meat. It's about this particular animal being slaughtered or not. It's not only that we're trying not to eat this particular meat, it's also that we are trying to keep this particular animal from being slaughtered, treating it differently from other animals that we use, so on and so forth. And that's the point that I really wanted to drive home. Also, what's interesting is if you actually take a look at these different stories of Gorakshaks going and finding some, illegal cattle smuggling and things like that, these issues tend to be more prevalent in places where dairy is a more prominent part of the diet and people tend to own more. There are more cows that are raised and kept so on and so forth, meaning the what is derisively sometimes called the cow belt, the states of the northern part of the country, and also the western region like Gujarat, Maharashtra, so on and so forth. You see much less of this in the south of India and also Bengal and the northeast and places like that, where cows are not nearly as important to people as they are there, which again reflects the fact that this is a very natural kind of folk religion type practice that grows out of the context that people find themselves in, the day to day life of people, how they're forming their values, as opposed to people reading some book or something of that nature to determine what they should or should not do. Because the thing about, say, Muslims not eating pork is, regardless of what particular climate Muslims happen to live in, what kind of livestock are suitable to be raised in that climate, so on and so forth, they cannot eat beef, or they cannot eat pork. Rather, they of course do eat beef. They can't eat pork no matter where they are and no matter what the situation in that particular terrain, in that particular culture is, because this is something that they believe that their God, the creator of the universe, told them not to do. And again, the Hindu practices surrounding cows and beef are significantly different from that. What's also interesting on the issue of diet, which again, a lot of Hindus in the West fall into this Abrahamized version of, is that unlike other religions that have food taboos that put those taboos upon the entire religion, we have a significant portion of our population, maybe a third, maybe 40%, something like that are vegetarian. Whereas the other part of the population, the majority of the Hindu population, is non vegetarian. This is something that is exceedingly hard for people coming from an Abrahamic mindset to really wrap their heads around, because they're thinking, well, if people are not eating meat, people are vegetarian for religious grounds, then that must mean that the people who do eat meat, they're not following the religion. How can it be that the religion says to do something, but only a minority of people are doing it? Shouldn't it be everyone? And this is again this thing that is exceedingly obvious to Indians in or Hindus in India, that, well, this is more of a caste and a regional based thing of whether you're a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian. But again, American Hindus, British Hindus, they don't really comprehend that, because they think, well, the larger society here in the Western world is entirely non-vegetarian. They don't even have this. They don't even use this term non-vegetarian, because vegetarianism here in the West is just a relatively recent fad that people who are environmentally conscious or interested in animal rights, things of this nature, they'll take it up. But it has absolutely no cultural foundation in Western culture. And so they have to grasp that, well, it's our religion that says this, our religion that says that. And they're also familiar with the fact that, despite the fact that there's Pashubali in India and Nepal and other places, you don't find any Pashubali in Hindu temples in the Western world, obviously. People are only eating vegetarian food and sweets and things of that nature that are offered there. And so there is this kind of disconnect in the minds of Indian American Hindus, that they don't really understand how people could derive a certain taboo from religion, but not really believe that that taboo would apply to society at large. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.